Meitei insurgent groups and their role in the current crisis in Manipur. Attacks on Kuki villages.
No commando, and though we report to the police and the army, no one is coming, and they are going to the wrong place. And then this is how the Chief Minister of Biren Singh doing in the village.
The ongoing violence in Manipur has seen a significant escalation, with Meitei insurgent groups intensifying their attacks on Kuki villages. These groups, including the People's Liberation Army, PLA, Kangle Yawol Kanalup, KYKL, United National Liberation Front, UNLF, and the Kanga Lapak Communist Party, KCP, have united under a common banner, known as Automby, to carry out organized attacks against the Kuki community. This alliance has led to the destruction of over 200 Kuki villages, leading to a severe humanitarian crisis. The insurgents have been using increasingly sophisticated tactics, including disguising themselves in police uniforms to carry out raids on Kuki villages. The brutal nature of these attacks has not only resulted in the loss of lives and homes, but has also exacerbated ethnic tensions in the region. Attacks on Kuki villages. The attacks on Kuki villages by the Meitei insurgent groups have been widespread and devastating. Over 200 villages have been set on fire, with homes, schools, and markets razed to the ground. The insurgents have systematically targeted the Kuki population, forcing them to flee their homes, with over 600 people displaced. Many of these displaced individuals are now living in overcrowded shelters, struggling to survive without access to basic necessities such as food, water, and medical care. A particularly disturbing aspect of these attacks is the insurgents' use of police uniforms. By disguising themselves as Indian security forces, they have been able to raid villages, causing confusion and fear among the Kuki population. This tactic has made it difficult for locals to differentiate between genuine law enforcement and insurgents, leading to widespread panic and a breakdown of trust in the state's ability to protect its citizens. The systematic burning of Kuki villages and the targeting of civilian infrastructure are part of a larger strategy by these insurgents to force the Kuki community out of their ancestral lands. These actions, which include not just physical attacks, but also psychological warfare, are aimed at weakening the Kuki resistance and asserting control over contested territories. Meitei insurgent groups alliance with Myanmar government. One of the most alarming dimensions of the current crisis is the involvement of the Myanmar government in providing shelter and support to Meitei insurgent groups. These groups, including the PLA and other factions, have historically used Myanmar's remote border areas as safe havens. Recent reports suggest that the Myanmar government has been providing financial backing to $1,500 a year in Indian currency, enabling these insurgents to bolster their operations. This cross-border alliance has allowed the insurgents to procure weapons, receive military training, and expand their networks. The Myanmar government's support has made it more difficult for Indian security forces to combat the insurgency, as these groups have had access to better resources and strategic support from across the border. The alliance has caused significant strain on Indo-Myanmar relations, as the Indian government has accused Myanmar of allowing these insurgents to operate freely on its soil. Despite this, Myanmar has largely turned a blind eye to these activities, providing a safe harbor for the insurgents, which in turn fuels the ongoing violence in Manipur. The shift of insurgents from Myanmar to Manipur. In recent months, there has been a significant shift in the insurgents' strategy. Many groups that had previously been based in Myanmar have now returned to Manipur, taking advantage of the growing ethnic conflict between the Meitei and Kuki communities. These insurgents, now operating under the Automby coalition, have played a crucial role in intensifying the violence against Kuki villages. Their return to India marks a dramatic escalation in the conflict, with the resources and training acquired during their time in Myanmar These insurgents are now carrying out more coordinated, brutal attacks on the Kuki population. The timing of their return is strategic, as they seek to capitalize on the ongoing unrest in Manipur to further their objectives, which include asserting dominance over the Kuki-dominated hill districts. Indian government's classification of terrorist groups. The Indian government has long classified groups like the PLA, KYKL, UNLF, and KCP as terrorist organizations under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA. These groups have been involved in a range of violent activities, including attacks on Indian security forces, bombings, and assassinations. The current wave of violence, which has led to widespread displacement and destruction in the Kuki community, has only reinforced the government's position that these groups are engaged in terrorist activities. Despite being labeled as terrorist organizations, these groups have continued to operate with increasing impunity, aided by external support from Myanmar. The ongoing attacks on Kuki villages and the increasing complexity of the insurgency highlight the urgency of addressing the situation before it spirals further out of control. Conclusion: a deepening crisis and the need for Kuki autonomy. The crisis in Manipur is more than just an ethnic conflict. It is a humanitarian disaster that requires urgent attention. Over 200 Kuki villages have been destroyed, and more than displaced, suffering immense hardship as they attempt to survive in the wake of violent attacks. The involvement of the Myanmar government in sheltering and supporting Meitei insurgent groups has further complicated the situation, allowing these groups to operate with greater strength and resources. For the Kuki community, the need for a separate administration has become more pressing than ever. With the ongoing violence, it is clear that their culture, land, and identity are under direct threat from insurgent groups seeking to dominate the region. The systematic destruction of Kuki villages and the targeting of civilian infrastructure highlight the existential threat faced by the Kuki people. In this context, a separate administrative framework for the Kuki community is essential to preserving their cultural heritage and ensuring the security of their people. India has a responsibility to protect all its citizens, and providing the Kuki community with a degree of autonomy would help safeguard their rights and provide a mechanism for resolving the deepening ethnic tensions. Without such a measure, the Kuki people will continue to face marginalization and violence at the hands of dominant groups, further destabilizing the region. India's role in safeguarding the rights of its diverse populations, including the Kuki, is critical in preventing further violence and promoting lasting peace. The formation of a separate administrative structure for the Kuki community would be an important step toward preserving their land, culture, and identity in the face of these ongoing threats. For more updates on the crisis in Manipur and other regional developments, don't forget to subscribe to Zalengam Media. Disclaimer from Zalengam Media. The content presented in this article and the associated video footage is sourced from various public and open access platforms, and Zalengam Media does not claim ownership of these materials. The views expressed are for informative purposes only and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Zalengam Media. Subscribe to Zalengam Media for more detailed updates and coverage on the crisis in Manipur and other regional developments. Stay informed.